Hello, everyone. In this video, I will be going over the common fate mediational model. I have posted several other videos examining the baseline common fate as well as the common fate with individual parameters. And so if you haven't already watched those may be of help before jumping into this video that is covering mediation using the common fate model. So first, we will just begin to go over the syntax. And so I will be using lavaan and haven, and we'll also create a very simple rudimentary diagram so we can begin to visualize our model. And so we will first talk about the measurement syntax. Again, it should look fairly familiar for those of you who have analyzed the common fate model before. For those of you who have not, we are going to be using three constructs. We are going to be looking at relationship quality, which is indicated by male and female reports of relationship quality measured by the couple satisfaction index. And so we have CSI dyad, which is going to essentially create a dyadic mean that accounts for measurement error in each person's reports. And then we're going to have relationship mindfulness, which is the ability to, or the extent to which that you are intentional, thoughtful, and reflective in how you communicate with your partner. And then we are going to look at dyadic coping. This is a scale focused on stress communication processes and how couples navigate those reactions to stress and how they communicate about stress and how they manage it together. And so within the common fate model, if you're not familiar, it is, again, it's a dyadic analysis, and it is actually a little bit more restrictive than the actor-partner interdependence model because the variables that we can use within the common fate model need to be dyadically oriented. And so what I mean by that is that if we think about, the CESD, which measures depressive symptoms, or we think about the GAD, which measures anxiety, or we think about neuroticism or trait anger or substance use or any of these other variables, all of the questions on those assessments are what we call self-referential. So I feel depressed. I feel anxious. I drank 6 drinks last night. I have trouble worrying, right? So all of those, again, all the questions are self-referential about the individual. And so within an actor-partner model, that is more than fine, and it's even sufficient and even acceptable to use those types of variables. But when we are using the common fate model, what we are trying to do is we are trying to assess and measure the extent to which couples have shared variation on these constructs. And so although we could easily put depression in here, we don't really have perhaps a strong measurement case for my depressive symptoms being shared with my partner's depressive symptoms. So, there's some research that would suggest like secondary traumatic stress theory where mental health symptoms are communicable between partners, but that might actually be more consistent with like an actor partner. My depression causes my partner to also have depression, and you could do some non-recursive models and things like that. And so that doesn't really capture kind of the theoretical ideas of the common fate model of there being kind of a relationship level of depression. I think you could easily make the argument that there is such a construct. Like I'm thinking like couple emotional climate or family emotional climate, where you say my family tends to be anxious or my family tends to be hopeless. And so I think you absolutely can make those scales and those assessments that really capture family level mental health issues. But that's not the measurements that we have developed thus far. And so what happens is that we're creating a chasm between our measurement and our analysis, which again is a threat to internal validity. So when using the common fate model, we need to use measures that reference the relationship directly. So an example item for the CSI is all things considered, I am happy in my relationship. An example item from the dyadic coping is that me and my partner, we communicate effectively about stressors or something to that effect, right? Relationship mindfulness. It would be an example be is when I'm communicating with my partner, I'm kind of on autopilot, right? So there are the level is that is referenced in the measures is actually the relationship. So that's actually what allows us to use the common fate model. And that is why you will actually see the common fate model be used far more infrequently compared to the APIM. So moving from kind of some of the conceptual ideas of the common fate model into the estimation, each common fate variable, and we have three since we are testing mediation, is indicated by each partner's report on that construct. So we believe that there is a dyad level of dyadic coping, right? So it exists kind of beyond each individual and at that relationship level. So if you're a multi-level modeler, it exists at level 2, and you have each individual at level 1. And so the way I like to think about this is that the relationship level dyadic coping theoretically causes each partner's response on the observed measure that we have in our data file, right? And so we specify and constrain the factor loadings on each of our three common fate constructs to be 1. So that's where you will see this 1 star. All right. And so the equal tilde sign indicates we are going to be using confirmatory factor analysis. And here is the male report, and here is the female report. So male reports will always have an underscore M at the end when in using this data and interpreting the output. So we estimate our 3 common fate variables, and then it is business as usual with mediation. And so what we are going to do is we are going to have relationship quality be our dependent variable. We are going to have relationship mindfulness be our independent variable, and we are going to have dyadic coping as our mediator. So if you are familiar with some of the common notation, you have alpha path, which is from your IV to your mediator. You have your beta path from your mediator to your dependent variable. And you have your C prime path, which is the direct effect from your IV to your DV. Right. And so that's what we have estimated here. And so in lavaan, here is the syntax for specifying the indirect effect. So I'm just calling it alpha here for alpha path, beta here for beta path, and C prime here for C prime path to add labels to those pathways. And then I am telling lavaan here, just calculate AB, which is just at multiplying the A path times the B path. And that'll give us a point estimate as well as a standard error. In the common fate model, we always will report or estimate, I should say, the residual covariances between all the within person effects. And so what I mean by that is that for each common fate variable, we have a male and a female report. So we have 3 male reports and 3 female reports. So what we're going to do is covary all the male reports with one another and all the female reports with one another. So male relationship quality is covaried with male relationship mindfulness and male dyadic coping. And male relationship mindfulness is correlated with male dyadic coping. And so the reason we do that is to account for within person differences. So there might be testing effects, there might be things external in our model that are theoretical causes of all of these unmeasured variables that might be simultaneously impacting all of these, perhaps like depressive symptoms or attachment even. And so we want to account for that in our model. And then we do the exact same thing for women. All right. And again, if you're coming from an actor partner world, we account for interdependence through partner effects and through correlated residuals. But in the common fate world, we use the latent variables to handle that. And so we don't do any covariation across dyad member because that is already occurring at that latent level. So here is the syntax for generating our fit statistics. And so we have our model name here, we have the data. I use robust maximum likelihood, especially with relationship quality, because residuals tend to be substantially non-normal, because if we think about just the construct of relationship quality, people tend to not be in relationships if they're unhappy in them. So the marginal distribution tends to be highly skewed, and our models tend to not do a good enough job to make those residuals normal. So we end up having non-normal data and non-normal residuals, which can affect our standard errors as well as our chi-square statistic within our models. So we want to take care of that using robust maximum likelihood with Yuan and Bentler corrections via a scaling correction factor. We also have missing data. And so we want to implement FIML in order to not have listwise deletion. And of course, my default is include the mean structure. That's not all that important here since we're only really estimating covariances, but it's always nice to have. And then we have our fit statistics and our R squared, and we want our standardized values. And again, another default in almost all of my models is going to be requesting mod indices. Typically, I have 10, which is oftentimes, again, the default. Sometimes I'll move this down to 3.84 because that is the critical value. So any mod indice that shows up will be significant if you use that recommendation in your model in your revision. All right, so I will use the lavaan plot package to create just a very simple model or a pictorial representation of the model, so that we can again get a better sense of what the common fate model is doing in this kind of mediation framework. And a picture is worth 1,000 words, particularly when there's complex models, mediation, moderation. I find it helps the readers better connect to my models. And so we're going to go ahead and we're going to run this. And we'll take a look at the diagram. We can actually take a look at that first. So here is our diagram. We have our independent variable, which is a dyadic mean of relationship mindfulness, and that is predicting dyadic coping. I have intentionally requested no significance values, but you can absolutely add those into the figure where you can have some asterisks here to indicate whether or not the effects are significant. So, but this is significant. Higher levels of relationship mindfulness are associated with higher levels of dyadic coping, and higher levels of dyadic coping are associated with a stronger relationship. There's higher levels of relationship quality. It is important to note that all of these effects are at the dyad level, not at the individual level. And so when you are writing this up, I would say something along the lines of higher levels of dyadic relationship mindfulness is associated with a 0.41 unit increase in dyad level dyadic coping, which is then associated with a 0.89 unit increase in dyad level relationship quality or relationship satisfaction. All right. And so again, one of the sticking points is often that people will write up these really nice discussion sections, but they will focus on the individual level, or they will not directly address that these associations are at the dyad level, at the level of the couple, not the level of the individual. And so we will shift over to our output. So we can make this a little bit bigger so we can get a sense of what our model is doing. And so we have 3 degrees of freedom. We have a fairly reasonable chi-square statistic. It is not significant. And so this is, again, provides preliminary evidence that our model is fitting. Again, we'll take a gestalt approach and consult all the other fit indices as well. We see here that our CFI and our TLI are generally being well behaved. We'll scroll down our RMSEA. I'm not even going to really give it that much thought because there are too few degrees of freedom in our model to really accurately understand what the RMSEA is actually trying to tell us, because RMSEA is biased in small degree of freedom models. And SRMR is, again, it's generally it's being well behaved, but again, it tends to be generally really well behaved in general, in my anecdotal experience of SEM. So we'll move down to the results, and we see here are the unstandardized loadings, and here are the standardized loadings. Again, for the common fate model, we want these loadings to be above 0.70 because that gives us, again, approximately 50% of the variance is at the dyad level. Anything lower than that, so if our loadings were 0.60, that means only 36% is at the dyad level. And so that really doesn't, the impact of the parameter estimates and things of that nature, there's just less variance to account for, so those effects tend to be smaller. But even if you have lower loadings, there are other things that we can do within the same vein of the common fate model, such as a latent congruence model or model those individual parameters. So moving to our regressions, again, with very much in line with what most of you are probably familiar with in terms of mediation. We have 3 regression effects. We ended up keeping the direct effect, but we can certainly test whether or not that is removing that causes potential problems. But in this model, we have our A path, which is exceptionally strong. We have a 1 unit increase in dyadic coping is associated with, excuse me. So here's our path. My apologies. So here's our direct path. So this is relationship mindfulness to dyadic coping. Here is going to be dyadic coping to relationship quality, and here is going to be dyadic coping on relationship mindfulness. Right, so we do have an exceptionally strong effect from dyadic coping in the prediction of relationship mindfulness or of relationship quality. And then we also see relationship mindfulness predicts dyadic coping. So the more intentional I am when I communicate with my partner, or the more intentional, I should say, we are when communicating with each other, the better we cope with stress and the better we communicate about stressors, which makes us happier in our relationship. Those would be the best ways to interpret it. If I start moving into the I language, the happier I am or the better I communicate, then we are moving to an actor-partner interdependence model framework. All right. So we have our covariances here. Despite some of them being not significant, I strongly recommend against removing them from the model because depending on their sign, they will either over or underestimate your actual parameters in the model. And generally, we will find, because we are looking at within-person effects, these are going to be positively associated most of the time. So that means we are going to be at significant risk for overestimating our alpha and beta pathways. So just a word of caution against removing these non-significant effects, despite our model probably not fitting any worse. And so the last thing we will take a look at is our defined parameters down at the bottom. And so here we see that our unstandardized estimate, our standard error, our z-value all tell us that we have a significant indirect effect. So multiplying that A path times that B path results in a indirect effect or a compound path that is significantly different from zero. And the p-value is less than 0.001. And we have an exceptionally strong indirect effect, a standardized indirect effect of 0.389, which is, again, not all that surprising given the strength of the standardized regression coefficients that we found up here. Right. And so again, we've already gone over the model, and you'll notice in the actual visual representation, it shows your unstandardized effects. Right. So that is, in essence, the common fate mediational model. There is nothing really special or unique about the common fate mediational model when it comes to, again, testing indirect effects. It's just getting clear on the level of analysis. That tends to be the biggest sticking point for most folks when they are learning the common fate model and testing these indirect effects. So hopefully this has been helpful. And thank you so much for watching.